The girl who never danced. Until the school janitor surprised her doing something extraordinary. Emily Wilson pressed her little face against the glass door of the auditorium, watching the other children twirl and jump to the music. Her tiny hands clutched the glass, leaving smudges she would later wipe away with her shirt. That's when someone found the 7-year-old girl silently crying in the hallway of Lincoln Elementary School in Denver. Marcus Johnson had just finished sweeping the courtyard when he spotted the small figure curled up by the auditorium door. "Hey there, little one, what's wrong?" asked the janitor, crouching down to her level. Emily wiped her nose with the back of her hand and looked up at the tall man with dark skin and a kind smile, who always wore a navy blue cap. Marcus had worked at the school for over 15 years and knew every child by name. "Nothing, Mr. Marcus," she murmured, trying to step away. "Come on, Emily, I've known you since you started first grade here. I can tell when you're sad. What's the matter?" The girl hesitated, glancing once more into the auditorium where teacher Ms. Thompson was leading rehearsals for the end-of-year performance. It was November, and every class was preparing for the big event in December. I wanted to dance too," Emily confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's heart ached. Emily was one of the quietest students in school, always alone during recess, always with a melancholy air that didn't suit a child her age. "Why don't you join the dance class then?" "Grandma Dorothy won't let me. She says dancing is the devil's work and that I can never, ever dance." The janitor was puzzled. He knew Mrs. Dorothy by sight, a stern woman who always arrived right on time to pick up her granddaughter, never early, never late. She had grey hair always pulled into a tight bun and wore dark clothes. "But why, Emily?" "I don't know. She never really explained. Just said dancing brings bad luck to the family and that I should forget this nonsense." Marcus saw deep sadness in the girl's brown eyes. In his 15 years working with children, he'd learned to read their emotions like open books. Emily carried a sorrow that went far beyond just being forbidden to dance. "Does your mom say no too?" "My mom lives far away. She can't take care of me. That's why I live with Grandma." The girl offered no further details, and Marcus respected her silence. He knew some children carried stories too heavy for their age. Just then, the music inside the auditorium stopped, and the children began filing out for recess. Emily shrank back, as if she didn't want to be seen there. "Come on, let's go get some juice in the courtyard," Marcus suggested, holding out his hand to her. Over the next few days, the janitor watched Emily more closely. She always lingered outside the auditorium during rehearsals, peeking through the door crack. Her eyes shone with such intense longing, it was painful to see. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. One afternoon, after everyone had gone home, Marcus found Emily still at school. The girl was sitting on the floor of the empty auditorium, her back to the door, moving her arms delicately as if dancing while seated. "Emily, what are you still doing here? Isn't your grandma coming to pick you up?" The girl turned, startled. Tears streaked her face. "She's at the doctor's. Told me to wait here till she gets back." "And you were?" Trying to imagine what it would be like if I could dance like the other girls. Marcus Johnson's heart broke at that moment. He looked at the small, sad child, and an idea began forming in his mind. "Emily, would you like me to teach you a few steps, just so you know how it feels?" The little girl's eyes widened. "You know how to dance?" Marcus smiled, a smile filled with memories. "I did. It's been a long time, but I used to dance when I was younger." "But what if Grandma finds out?" "You don't have to tell her. It can be our secret." Emily hesitated for a few seconds, glancing around the empty auditorium. Her longing to finally experience dancing outweighed her fear. "Okay," she whispered. Marcus took off his cap and placed it on a chair. Then he held out his hand to Emily, who stood up slowly. "First, we'll learn to feel the music," he said, humming a soft melody. The first movements were timid and clumsy. Emily stumbled over her own feet, and her motor coordination still seemed underdeveloped. but there was something special in how she completely surrendered to the movements, even if they weren't perfect. Like this, nice and slow, Marcus guided, holding her small hands. Dancing isn't about rushing, it's about feeling. In the days that followed, always after school, Emily and Marcus met in the auditorium for their secret lessons. The janitor had discovered that his passion for dance, dormant for so many years, still pulsed in his heart. But as time passed, Marcus began noticing something concerning. Emily had clear motor difficulties that seemed to have gone unnoticed by everyone. She struggled with balance, her legs trembled when she tried to hold certain positions, and her coordination between arms and legs was limited. "Emily, have you seen a doctor recently?" he asked one afternoon. "Why? Am I sick?" No, it's not that. It's just, you have some challenges that a professional could help with." The girl stopped moving and looked at him with worry. "I can't dance right, can I? I'm bad at it." "No, sweetheart, you're not bad at anything. It's just that your body needs a little more practice and maybe some medical help, but you have something very special inside you." On a rainy Thursday, as Emily tried to perform a simple spin, she lost her balance and fell. She wasn't hurt, but she started crying in frustration. "I'll never be like the other girls," she sobbed. Marcus knelt beside her and hugged her. "Emily, you don't have to be like the other girls. You just need to be you, and you're already special just the way you are." "But I want to dance beautifully." "And you will. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life are different from what we expect." At that moment, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Emily shrank in fear, but it was just the janitor, Mrs. Jenkins, who had forgotten something at school. "Good afternoon, Mr. Marcus." "Hi, Emily," she greeted, waving through the half-open door. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins," they both replied. When the janitor left, Emily sighed in relief. "Mr. Marcus, what if someone tells Grandma? We'll be careful so that doesn't happen." But the following week, during one of their impromptu lessons, Principal Jennifer Stevens appeared in the auditorium. She had stayed late to handle administrative work when she heard music coming from the auditorium. "Marcus, what's going on here?" The janitor and Emily immediately stepped apart. The girl froze in fear while Marcus tried to explain. "Principal Jennifer, you were using school property outside work hours without authorization, and you were alone with a student." Principal Ms. Stevens was a woman in her 50s, with short hair and a stern posture. She had been running the school for 10 years and was known for strictly enforcing the rules. "Principal, I can explain. Emily has a strong interest in dance and, Marcus, you know this is against school policy. You could lose your job over this." Emily began to cry. "Please don't fire Mr. Marcus, it's my fault. I asked him to teach me." The principal looked at the sobbing girl and her heart softened slightly, but the rules were clear. "Emily, I'll have to speak with your grandmother about this." "No, please. She'll be so angry with me." "You should have thought of that before. Marcus, you're suspended until further notice. Emily, go home." The girl ran out of the auditorium, leaving Marcus alone with the principal. He knew he was in trouble, but his biggest concern was Emily and how Mrs. Dorothy would react to the news. The next morning, Mrs. Dorothy Wilson arrived at the school with a sterner expression than usual. She was a tall, thin woman of 68, with completely grey hair always tied back. She wore dark clothes and carried herself in a way that intimidated everyone. "Principal, I'd like to understand this story you told me over the phone," she said, sitting in the office. "Mrs. Dorothy, I found your granddaughter in the auditorium with our janitor practicing dance. That's not allowed outside school hours and without proper supervision." "Dance?" Mrs. Dorothy's voice came out like a hiss. "Emily was dancing?" "Yes, ma'am. From what I gathered, Marcus was teaching her some steps." The woman's face turned pale. Her hands trembled slightly and she clenched her fists. "Where is my granddaughter now?" "In class." "But Mrs. Dorothy, perhaps we could discuss—" "There's nothing to discuss. I want to speak with Emily immediately." When Emily was called to the office and saw her grandmother, the blood drained from her face. She knew she was in serious trouble. "Emily Wilson, you disobeyed my most important rule," Mrs. Dorothy said in an icy tone. "Grandma, Quiet. Were you dancing after I strictly forbade it?" The girl started crying but nodded. "Principal, I want that janitor fired immediately, and my granddaughter will not be returning to this school." "Mrs. Dorothy, perhaps that's a bit extreme. Emily is an excellent student and—" "It's not extreme. It's necessary. Emily cannot have negative influences in her life. Dance has already brought enough tragedy to our family." Emily looked at her grandmother, not fully understanding, but sensing something deep and painful behind the prohibition. "Grandma, why is dance so bad?" Mrs. Dorothy looked at her granddaughter, and for a moment her hard expression wavered. But she quickly composed herself. "Because it is, and you will never question it again. We're leaving." As they walked out of the school, Emily cried the whole way home. Not only would she lose her secret dance lessons, but she would also never see Marcus again, the man who had become a father figure in her life. That afternoon, while Mrs. Dorothy prepared lunch, Emily locked herself in her room and cried until she fell asleep. In her dreams, she danced freely on a vast stage, fearless and unbound. Meanwhile, Marcus was at home, thinking of how he could help Emily. He had grown attached to the girl in a way he hadn't expected. In his 15 years at the school, he had never felt such a strong connection with a child. On Monday, when Marcus returned for a disciplinary meeting, he decided to dig deeper into the Wilson family's history. He asked the secretary, Deborah, who had worked there longer than him, for help. "Deborah, do you know Emily Wilson's family? Does her grandmother have something against dancing?" "Oh, Mr. Marcus, that's a sad story. Mrs. Dorothy was very different from who she is today." "How so?" "She was a ballerina, did you know? One of the best in Denver in the 70s and 80s. Marcus was shocked. "A ballerina? Mrs. Dorothy?" "Yes. Her name back then was Dorothy Coleman. She was known as Dottie Coleman. She danced at the City Performing Arts Center and performed in many important shows." "And what happened?" Deborah looked around to make sure they were alone. Her daughter, Christine, also danced. She was a child prodigy, about 8 years old when she started performing professionally. But during an important show, she fell off the stage and— The secretary hesitated. "And what?" "She injured her spine. She could never walk properly again. Now she lives in Aurora in an adapted home. Mrs. Dorothy stopped dancing that same day and never spoke about it again." Marcus felt like the pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. Now he understood Mrs. Dorothy's extreme reaction to dance. She had lost her passion and watched her daughter suffer permanent limitations because of it. And Emily? How did she end up with her grandmother? Christine can't take care of a child because of her physical limitations. Emily's father never took responsibility, so Mrs. Dorothy has raised the girl alone since she was a baby. That revelation completely changed Marcus's perspective on the situation. Mrs. Dorothy wasn't being cruel out of spite. She was trying to protect Emily from the same tragedy that had destroyed her family decades ago. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. During the disciplinary meeting, Marcus tried to explain his motivations to Principal Ms. Stevens and the educational supervisor who had been called in. "You don't understand," he said. "Emily isn't just a child who wants to dance. She has motor difficulties that could be helped through therapeutic dance." "Marcus," the principal replied, "I understand your good intentions, but you crossed important professional boundaries. What if I get her grandmother's permission? That's impossible." "Mrs. Dorothy has made her position clear. But what if I explain to her that dance could help Emily with her motor difficulties?" The supervisor, a man named Richard Hayes, intervened. "Marcus, you're not a therapist or a dance teacher. You're a custodian. Your job is to keep the school clean and organized. But I know that girl. I know I can help her. The decision is final," the principal concluded. "You're fired, effective today." Marcus left the school with a heavy heart. Not only had he lost the job he loved, but he could no longer help Emily. The girl would remain trapped in the sadness and limitations her family had imposed. That night at home, he looked at the old photos he kept in a box in the closet. There he was at 20, dancing in community performances around downtown Denver. He had stopped dancing when he got married, and had to focus on jobs that provided more financial stability. His wife, Melissa, had passed away 5 years ago from cancer. They'd never had children, a quiet sorrow Marcus carried with him. Maybe that was why Emily had touched his heart so deeply. Meanwhile, at the Wilson house, Emily had barely eaten all week. She was listless, no playing, no smiling. Mrs. Dorothy watched her granddaughter's sadness with a heavy heart, but remained firm in her decision. "Emily, you need to understand this was for your own good," she said during Thursday's dinner. "But I don't understand, Grandma. Why is dancing so bad?" Mrs. Dorothy took a deep breath. Maybe it was time to tell at least part of the truth. Dance hurt our family once. I don't want that to happen to you." "How did it hurt?" Your mother got hurt dancing when she was little. That's why she can't live with us." Emily stayed silent for a few minutes, processing that information. "Mommy used to dance." "She did, and I danced too." "You danced, Grandma?" Mrs. Dorothy got up from the table and went to the window. Her memories took her back to the 70s, when Dorothy Coleman was known all over Denver for her grace and talent on stage. "I danced. It was my whole life." "Why did you stop?" "Because I realized dance can be dangerous, especially for children." Emily stood up and moved closer to her grandmother. "But Grandma, I don't want to be a famous ballerina. I just want to dance because it makes me happy." Mrs. Dorothy looked at her granddaughter and saw in those brown eyes the same passion she herself had felt decades ago. And she also saw the same passion that had consumed Christine before the accident. "Go to bed, Emily, and I don't want to talk about this anymore." At school, teacher Alison Parker had noticed Emily's absence in the halls. She was the school's dance teacher, and though she'd never worked directly with Emily, she'd often seen the girl peeking through the door cracks. "Principal Jennifer, what happened to Emily Wilson? She hasn't been around." Her grandmother decided to transfer her to another school. Because of the situation with Mr. Marcus? Exactly. Allison was a woman in her 40s with a degree in dance from the University of Colorado. She'd arrived at the school 2 years ago and had been trying to develop an inclusive dance program for children with different abilities. "Jennifer, this bothers me. That girl clearly had an interest in dance, and from what I've heard, she has some motor difficulties that could be helped through therapeutic dance." Allison, her grandmother was firm. She doesn't want her granddaughter involved with dance in any way. But that doesn't make sense. Dance can be an important therapeutic tool for kids with coordination issues. The matter is closed, but Allison couldn't get Emily out of her head. She decided to research the Wilson family and discovered, through older dance colleagues in Denver, the whole story of Dorothy Coleman. "Dorothy Coleman? Of course I remember her," said a retired colleague. "She was one of the most talented dancers of our generation. Stopped suddenly in the 80s. I heard her daughter had an accident during a performance." Allison began to understand Mrs. Dorothy's resistance, but she also saw an opportunity to help both Emily and Mrs. Dorothy overcome the trauma of the past. She decided to take a risk. She went to visit Mrs. Dorothy at home. It was a Saturday afternoon when Allison rang the doorbell of the simple but well-kept house where Emily lived with her grandmother. Mrs. Dorothy answered warily. "Good afternoon. Are you Mrs. Dorothy Wilson?" "I am. Who are you?" "My name is Allison Parker. I'm the dance teacher at the school Emily used to attend." Mrs. Dorothy's face closed off immediately. "You have nothing to say to me. Please just give me 5 minutes. I'm not here to convince you to let Emily dance." Mrs. Dorothy hesitated. There was something sincere in the woman's voice. "What do you want then?" "I want to understand and maybe help." Mrs. Dorothy let Allison into the living room. Emily was in her bedroom but could hear the conversation through the thin wall. "Mrs. Dorothy, I know who you were. I know about Dorothy Coleman, and I know about your daughter's accident." The woman paled. "How did you—" "I'm from the dance world. I know people who danced around the same time as you did, and I want you to know how sorry I am for what happened." Mrs. Dorothy sank heavily into a chair. "Then you understand why I can't allow Emily to get involved with dance?" "I understand your fear. But Mrs. Dorothy, Emily has motor difficulties that could be addressed through therapeutic dance. I'm not talking about professional training or risky performances. I'm talking about movements that could help her motor development. No, absolutely not. Do you want Emily to carry the physical limitations she has now for the rest of her life? Mrs. Dorothy glared at Allison. You don't understand. Dance destroys everything it touches. It ruined my career. It ruined my daughter's life. It nearly tore our whole family apart. Mrs. Dorothy, may I ask what happened in Christine's accident? The question touched a deep wound. Mrs. Dorothy was silent for a long moment before answering. Christine was 8. She was a prodigy, an extraordinary child. I was pushing her toward a professional career too soon because I wanted her to have every opportunity I never had. Allison listened quietly. It was a performance of The Nutcracker at the City Performing Arts Center. Christine had an important solo. I was in the wings, so proud, watching my daughter shine on stage. Mrs. Dorothy's voice began to tremble. She was doing a series of jumps when she lost her balance, fell from the raised part of the set, 3 meters high. And what happened after? Spinal injury. The doctors said she'd have limitations for life. I never set foot in a theater again. Never listened to classical music again. I packed away all the ballet shoes, all the costumes, all the memories. Allison felt her eyes well up. Mrs. Dorothy, I can't imagine the pain you've carried, but Emily isn't Christine, and the dance I'm proposing for her has nothing to do with performances or shows. It doesn't matter. The risk is always there. Mrs. Dorothy, may I tell you something? The older woman nodded. I've worked with therapeutic dance for 10 years. I've helped dozens of children with motor difficulties develop coordination, balance, and self-esteem through safe, controlled movements. Emily wouldn't just benefit, she clearly has a natural passion for dance. How do you know about her passion? Because I'd always see her watching through the door cracks, because when Mr. Marcus taught her, she lit up in a way I'd never seen before. Just then, Emily appeared in the doorway. She'd overheard the whole conversation. Grandma, is it true Mom got hurt dancing? Mrs. Dorothy looked at her granddaughter with tear-filled eyes. It's true, sweetheart. And is it true you were a dancer? I was. Emily slowly walked closer to her grandmother. Grandma, can I see Mom? Emily, I want to ask her if she regrets dancing. Mrs. Dorothy had no answer. For years, she'd avoided the subject of dance with Christine precisely because she feared the response. Allison seized the moment. Mrs. Dorothy, what if we visited your daughter together? Maybe it's time to have an honest talk about the past. I don't know if... Please, Grandma, Emily pleaded. I need to understand. Mrs. Dorothy looked at her granddaughter and saw in those eyes a determination that reminded her of her younger self. Maybe it really was time to face the past. All right, we'll visit your mother. On Monday, the 3 of them went to Aurora to see Christine Wilson Parker. She lived in a small but cozy house adapted for her special needs. At 32, Christine had long brown hair and a warm smile that brightened when she saw Emily. Sweetheart! What a wonderful surprise. Emily ran to hug her mother, who was in a wheelchair. It was always emotional when they met, which only happened a few times a year. Mom, I need to ask you something important. You can ask, sweetheart. Do you regret dancing when you were little? Christine looked surprised at her daughter, then at Mrs. Dorothy, and finally at Allison, who had been introduced as Emily's teacher. Why are you asking that, Emily? Because Grandma said dancing hurt our family, and that's why I can't dance. But I really want to dance, Mom. Christine looked at her mother with an expression that mixed surprise and sadness. Mom, you never let Emily dance because of what happened to me. Mrs. Dorothy lowered her head. I couldn't risk losing Emily, too. Mom, Christine held her mother's hands. Do you think I regret dancing? You don't. Mom, the 8 years I danced were the happiest of my life. Yes, the accident was terrible and changed everything, but I wouldn't trade those years of happiness for anything in the world. Mrs. Dorothy began to cry. But you were left limited because of dancing. I was limited because of an accident. Dancing gave me years of joy, confidence, discipline, art. The accident was a tragedy, but it wasn't dancing's fault. Emily listened carefully. Mum, would you still want to dance if you could? Every day, sweetheart, every day I dream I'm dancing. Alison decided to step in gently. Christine, I'm a dance teacher and I work with therapeutic dance. There are adapted forms of dance for people with physical limitations. If you're interested. Really? Christine's eyes lit up. I could actually dance again? Of course. Dance isn't just about legs and jumps. It's about expression, movement, emotion. Mrs. Dorothy watched the conversation in silence, seeing her daughter excited in a way she hadn't seen in decades. Emily, Christine said, I want you to dance. I want you to have every opportunity I had, and more. And I want to be there to watch. The girl smiled for the first time in weeks. Really, Mom? Really? And Mom, she looked at Mrs. Dorothy, it's time to stop being afraid of the past. Mrs. Dorothy wiped her tears and looked at her daughter and granddaughter. Christine, you really don't regret it? Mom, I regret many things in life, but dancing isn't one of them. At that moment, something broke inside Mrs. Dorothy's chest. It was as if a wall she'd built decades ago finally crumbled. Emily, she said finally, if you really want to dance, I won't stop you anymore. The girl squealed with joy and hugged her grandmother. Really, Grandma? Really? Really. But on one condition. What? I want to join too. I want to dance again, Ants. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. From that day on, everything changed for the Wilson family. Alison began working with Emily in therapeutic dance sessions, focusing on exercises that would help her motor difficulties without unnecessary risks. Mrs. Dorothy, for the first time in 30 years, stepped into a dance studio. Alison had suggested she join a senior dance group that met at the neighborhood cultural center. On the first day, when Mrs. Dorothy put on the ballet shoes she'd kept for decades, she cried, but they were tears of freedom, not pain. Dorothy Coleman? One of the other participants asked. Are you the Dorothy Coleman who danced at the City Performing Arts Center? I was, she replied shyly. Oh my, you were my idol when I was young. Gradually, Mrs. Dorothy began reconnecting with her long-lost passion. She discovered that dancing in her golden years had a completely different charm than what she had known in her youth. It was more about expression and less about technical perfection. Meanwhile, Emily was making surprising progress. Under Ms. Thompson's careful guidance, her coordination and balance issues were improving week after week. Ms. Thompson, do you think I could ever perform in a show someday? Emily asked after 3 months of lessons. Of course, Emily, but remember, the most important thing isn't the performance, it's how you feel when you dance. I feel happy, really happy. But there was one problem. Emily missed Marcus terribly. He had been the first to believe in her dreams and had also been punished for it. She kept asking her grandmother about him. Grandma, could we look for Mr. Marcus and apologize? Apologize for what, Emily? Because he got fired because of me, and he was just being kind. Mrs. Dorothy thought about it. Marcus really had been punished unfairly. He had seen Emily's potential before anyone else and had tried to help her the only way he knew how. You're right, Emily. Let's go find Marcus. Finding Marcus wasn't hard. He had gotten a job as a doorman at a commercial building in downtown Denver. When Mrs. Dorothy and Emily visited him one Saturday afternoon, he was completely surprised. Mrs. Dorothy, Emily, what are you doing here? Emily ran to hug him. Mr. Marcus, she knows the truth now, I can dance. Marcus looked confused at Mrs. Dorothy. What do you mean? Marcus, I came to apologize. You were right about Emily and about dance. I was letting fear from the past ruin my granddaughter's future. Mrs. Dorothy, let me finish. You lost your job trying to help Emily. That wasn't fair, and I want to try to make it right. Don't worry about me. I found another job. Mr. Marcus, Emily interrupted, would you still want to teach me to dance? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Of course, little one, but you have a real teacher now. But I want you to teach me too. Ms. Thompson teaches the technique, but you teach with your heart. Marcus looked at Mrs. Dorothy, asking for permission. Marcus, I'd love for you to stay part of Emily's life, if you're willing, of course. From that day on, Emily had two sources of dance lessons, technical classes with Ms. Thompson and heart-led lessons with Marcus. Mrs. Dorothy sometimes joined in, and that's how she discovered Marcus truly had a natural talent for dance. "Marcus, have you ever thought about dancing professionally again?" she asked during one of their sessions in the park. "Mrs. Dorothy, I'm 52. That's no age to start a dance career." "Who said anything about a career? I'm talking about joy, about doing what you love." It was true. Marcus had rediscovered his passion for dance through Emily, and now he missed it whenever he wasn't teaching her. 3 months later, surprising news reached them. Lincoln Elementary School had fired Principal Jennifer Stevens for other administrative issues, and the new principal, Rebecca Mitchell, wanted to revamp the school's cultural program. Ms. Thompson saw an opportunity and scheduled a meeting. "Principal Mitchell, I'd like to propose a special project, an inclusive dance program for children with different abilities and needs." "Interesting. How would it work?" "We'd combine therapeutic dance, adaptive dance, and traditional dance all in one program. And I'd like to suggest a special assistant." "Who?" "Marcus Johnson. He was unfairly dismissed from the school for trying to help a student, but he has a natural talent for working with children through dance." Principal Ms. Mitchell had already heard about Marcus's case and was interested in making things right. "And the student he was helping?" "Emily Wilson. She would be our first student in the program. She has motor difficulties that are already being addressed through dance, with extraordinary results. Let's try an experiment. Can you organize a pilot presentation of the program?" Allison left the meeting excited. Finally, they would have the chance to show what inclusive dance could do for children. The preparation for the pilot presentation took 2 months. Emily was excited but nervous. It would be her first public performance, and she wanted it to be perfect. "Emily, remember what we always talk about," Marcus would say during rehearsals. "Dance doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be true." "But what if I fall? What if I forget the steps?" "If you fall, you get back up. If you forget the steps, you make up new ones. The important thing is to have fun." Mrs. Dorothy was anxious too. It would be the first time in decades she'd watch a dance performance by someone in the family. But this time, instead of fear, she felt pride. Christine had arranged for an adapted vehicle and was coming especially to watch her daughter. It would be the first dance performance she'd attended since her own accident. The week before the performance, Emily had a nervous breakdown. "Grandma, what if I disappoint everyone?" "Emily, you've already made us so proud just by trying. The result of the performance doesn't matter." "But Mom will be there, and Mr. Marcus lost his job because of me. I need to show it was worth it." Mrs. Dorothy knelt in front of her granddaughter. "Emily, look at me. Mr. Marcus didn't lose his job because of you. He lost it because he tried to help you, and that was the most beautiful thing anyone could have done." "Really? Really? And you know what? No matter how the performance goes, you've already won. You've overcome fear, worked hard, and brought our whole family back to dance." On the day of the performance, the school auditorium was full. Besides the new principal and the educational supervisors who would evaluate the program, there were dozens of parents, students, and community members. Emily was backstage, wearing a simple but beautiful costume Mrs. Dorothy had made for her. It was light blue, like the dress she wore the day she met Marcus. "Ready, Princess?" Marcus asked. "I think so. What if I forget everything?" "Then you improvise. Dance is about feeling, not memorizing." When the music started and Emily stepped onto the stage, the auditorium fell silent. The girl was visibly nervous but began moving to the choreography she had rehearsed. For the first few seconds, everything went smoothly. Emily performed the movements with the natural grace she had developed over months of training. But when it came time for a sequence of turns, she stumbled and nearly fell. A murmur spread through the audience. Emily froze for a few seconds, staring at the crowd in fear. Then she saw Marcus backstage, discreetly performing the movements they had practiced together, and she saw Mrs. Dorothy in the audience, who stood up and began clapping, encouraging her granddaughter to continue. Emily took a deep breath and decided to follow Marcus's advice. She forgot the choreography and began dancing from the heart. She created her own movements, expressing through her body all the joy she felt at finally being able to dance freely. What followed wasn't technically perfect, but was deeply moving. Emily danced with such contagious joy that many in the audience were moved to tears. When the music ended, the auditorium erupted in applause. Emily took an awkward but smiling bow and ran to hug Marcus backstage. "I did it, Mr. Marcus, I did it." "You sure did, Princess, and it was beautiful." In the audience, Mrs. Dorothy was crying with emotion. Beside her, Christine also had tears in her eyes. "Mum," said Christine, "our girl is special." "She really is," agreed Mrs. Dorothy, and dancing made her shine. After the performance, Principal Ms. Mitchell approached Allison and Marcus. "The program is approved, and Marcus, we'd like to invite you back to the school as the official assistant for the inclusive dance program." Marcus felt as if a huge weight had lifted from his shoulders. Not only was he reclaiming his place at the school, but he was getting an even better position, doing exactly what he loved. "Principal, I accept with great pleasure." In the months that followed, the school's inclusive dance program became a model for other institutions. Emily continued to progress, both physically and emotionally. Her motor difficulties improved significantly, and her self-esteem blossomed. Mrs. Dorothy became one of the most dedicated students in the senior dance group. She had rediscovered her passion for dance, but now with a more mature and healthy perspective. Christine began participating in an adapted dance group for people with physical limitations. For the first time since the accident, she felt like a dancer again. And Marcus found his true purpose in life. Working with children through dance wasn't just a job for him, it was a mission. In December, during the school's official year-end performance, Emily had her second public recital. This time she was confident and relaxed. She had invited her whole family, Mrs. Dorothy, Christine, and Marcus, whom she considered family. The performance was an absolute success. Emily danced with natural ease and joy, showing all the progress she had made. But the most emotional moment came when, at the end of her performance, she invited Mrs. Dorothy and Marcus to join her on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily said into the microphone with the confidence of a child who had learned to believe in herself, "I want to thank the two people who made it possible for me to be here today." Mrs. Dorothy stepped hesitantly onto the stage, but when Emily took her hand, she felt young again. "My grandma taught me that sometimes we have to be brave to overcome fear, and Mr. Marcus taught me that dance comes from the heart." The three of them danced together on stage to a simple, emotional song. Mrs. Dorothy moved with the elegance she had never completely lost. Marcus danced with the joy of someone who had rediscovered his passion, and Emily danced with the freedom of a child who could finally be herself. The audience watched, moved by a scene that represented so much more than a dance performance. It was the story of a family that had overcome trauma, fear, and prejudice through the transformative power of art. When the music ended, the three embraced at center stage under a shower of applause. In the crowd, Christine cried tears of joy, proud to see her daughter, her mother, and her friend Marcus united by the same passion that had defined her own childhood. After the show, as they were tidying up the auditorium, Emily asked Marcus, "Mr. Marcus, do you think we'll keep dancing together forever?" "Emily, dance connects people in a very special way. Even when we grow up and take different paths, the dance stays inside us forever. And Grandma, will she keep dancing too? Your grandma rediscovered a part of herself that had been hidden for a long time. I'm sure she'll keep dancing until she's 100. Mrs. Dorothy, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped closer to them. "Emily, do you know what the greatest gift you ever gave me was?" "What was it, Grandma?" "You taught me it's never too late to start over. And that fear of the past shouldn't rule the future." "And what was the greatest gift I ever got, Grandma?" "I don't know. What was it?" "I got a whole family who supports me. You, Mom, and Mr. Marcus." Marcus smiled, his heart warmed. He'd found in Emily the daughter he never had, and in Dorothy, an unlikely but true friendship. "And I learned," Marcus said, "that sometimes helping someone achieve a dream can change the lives of everyone around them." In the years that followed, the story of Emily, Mrs. Dorothy, and Marcus became well known across Denver. The inclusive dance program at Lincoln Elementary School expanded and became a national model. Emily grew into a confident and talented young woman. She never pursued dance professionally, but kept it as an essential part of her life. At 16, she began helping Marcus teach younger children. Mrs. Dorothy became one of the most respected dancers in Denver's senior group. She was often invited to speak about overcoming trauma and rediscovering passions later in life. Christine made so much progress with adaptive dance that she began teaching others with physical limitations. She never fully regained movement in her legs, but found incredible ways to express herself through wheelchair dance. Marcus became the coordinator of inclusive dance programs across Denver's metro area. He discovered his true calling was using dance to transform lives. One autumn afternoon, 5 years after Emily's first performance, the four of them gathered in the school auditorium for a special intergenerational dance session, a new project uniting children, adults, and seniors. "Emily," Marcus said as he adjusted the sound system, "do you remember when we first met?" "Of course. I was crying because I couldn't dance." "And now?" Emily looked around the auditorium, seeing people of all ages preparing to dance together. She saw her grandmother helping a little child with their first steps, her mother guiding a teenager in a wheelchair, and Marcus smiling with the same kindness as always. "Now I know dance isn't about what we can't do. It's about what we can do when we have the courage to try." "And what's the most important thing you've learned from all this?" Emily thought for a moment. "I learned that sometimes people stop us from doing things because they're afraid of losing us. But when we show we can be careful and responsible, they learn to trust us." "And what else?" "I learned that helping one person can change the lives of everyone around them. You helped me, and that changed Grandma's life, which changed Mum's life, and now she helps others." Marcus nodded, proud of how Emily had matured and developed such wisdom. "Emily, want to know a secret?" "Yes. When I first started teaching you, I thought I was helping you, but really you were helping me. You gave me a new purpose in life." "Really?" "Really. Sometimes we don't even know we need help until someone comes along to help us." As the music began and the auditorium filled with people dancing together, Emily felt deep gratitude for every difficult moment they'd faced. Every tear, every fear, every obstacle had been necessary to reach that moment of perfect harmony. She looked at Marcus, who was dancing with an 80-year-old woman, and at Mrs. Dorothy, who was teaching basic steps to a girl the same age Emily had been when it all began. She looked at Christine, who was making beautiful movements with her arms as her wheelchair spun gently. And Emily understood that this was so much more than dance. It was love. It was family. It was proof that when people come together with goodwill, they can overcome any hardship and create something beautiful together. The music continued and Emily danced. She danced for all the tears she had cried. She danced for Mrs. Dorothy's courage in overcoming the past. She danced for Christine's determination to never give up on her dreams. She danced for Marcus's kindness in believing in her. And most of all, she danced for the joy of being alive, of having a family who loved her, and knowing there were still many years of dance ahead. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of Emily and her family's story. Do you think Mrs. Dorothy made the right choice in overcoming her fear of the past? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.